So you've heard a lot of perspectives about all the issues. And again, I highlight there are a lot. I always hate that whenever I stand up here and I tell you how the problem's really worse than you thought it was. You know, you come for a cure and, oh no, you got much more wrong with you than you know. But that is kind of the fact of the matter. We want to open it up now, and we ran a little bit over, but I don't blame them. They were a wonderful panel. I gave them 7 minutes, like I think you heard me mention. I overran, I believe, at the beginning, so I apologize. Anyhow, so I have some questions for the panel, but I'd first open it to the floor if anybody has questions they want to ask. Oh, there's one over here. No, you guys go blind. I showed them some questions.
Yeah, okay. Chris Davis, VP of Smart Cities at Simcom Lighting. I was here last year. I go to a lot of smart city conferences, and for those of us that are in the space, it seems to be like, to me, that there's just, first of all, a lack of attention to the cybersecurity aspect in smart cities, because the assets, many of them that you want to instrument or put sensors on or control, are outdoors. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, since you're experts in this space and I'm just a business guy, what are you seeing with respect to the outside world? And I should comment that I come from the factory automation and process control world and high performance building, so I understand that. But I'm just seeing, just a dearth of effort in this outdoor space where you're putting sensors or controls on, an asset like a pressure sensor on a fire hydrant, or things that go on streetlight poles.
Does anybody want to comment on it?
Here, I'll comment on that. I actually don't think the outdoor is the problem. I mean, heck, if you want something outdoor, I don't think he ran those trucks indoors much. So I don't think it's indoor, outdoor. It's more you nailed it when you said it's such a small component. It's just a pressure sensor on a fire hydrant. And so there's been this move from pretty disposable components that were dumb as a sack of hammers to making those intelligent devices, but we didn't move security along with it. And I mean, that includes in my house where I've got all these smart light switches, which are absolutely a security hazard. So I think that's the problem, is we're putting the smarts into what were formerly disposable dumb devices like light switches or pressure sensors, but we're not moving the security along with it. And hopefully that's starting to change. And what our friend from Intel just mentioned, perfect.
When you have outdoor products, you talk mostly about communication. The communication is probably in wireless, and the dangerous thing of wireless is anyone can attack it. You don't even see it physically, but even when you have wired, you can go in routers and get a remote attack. And I think in a future war, we will see this as a standard product between countries. They try to shut down the infrastructure each other without having one bomb shot. Yeah, so there will be something we have to be prepared, and it starts, of course, in cities. So the biggest challenge is the brownfield. You have existing products who usually have old technology. There is an investment. You have to wait for this before you replace it. And it has usually proprietary solutions. You don't know which classifications they follow. So the first rule would be, when you have a communication, always be sure you work with an open standard, which is permanently preceded in the expectations. For example, OPC-UA or DDS or whatever. There's a couple products, M2M and everything, but you have to come away from the company said, we have here something, we cannot take really how it works because it's very old, but it works well so far. That's not the right answer.
Go ahead, John. Or go ahead. Yeah.
There we go. Mic reaches. Okay, great. So again, from the OEM perspective, I think something that has been changing very much in the last couple of years is the availability of the security in the hardware devices. It's honestly nothing new at all. ARM's been supporting hardware-based root of trust for over a decade, but the use rate for it, the uptake rate, is tiny because it's been extraordinarily difficult. It's usually had a massive overhead from your programming schedule to develop a separate secure world versus real world. application. And it's hard to do that, especially for these device manufacturers who are running, a $50 margin on each one of these parts. Last couple of years, there's been a couple of good open source programs that are making that available and using the standard NXP, TI, Intel, the smaller chipsets for smaller devices. And I think that's what's going to move that forward. It's just that change in the economy of scale, while folks who were, one of the Allen Bradleys have a much bigger appetite for budget, or Samsungs for the phones, getting that $50 pressure sensor to use security is going to take the community model so they don't have to develop it on their own.
Richard or Camilo?
Yeah, I just
want
wanted to build on that last point, which I agree. I mean, a lot of the IP for doing security, not all, but a lot of it has been available for some time. And whether you talk to Intel or whether you talk to ARM, you'll often hear the comment, it's actually getting people to use it. And I'm not pointing the fingers at our partners. It goes both ways, which is, in the time I've been in the security space, I've realized some extraordinarily bright people, but not always quite able to communicate how somebody who's of lesser capability can use that technology. And we need to be able to wrap it up and package it in ways that it's easily digestible. Back to the USB analogy, right? It's got to work, but it has to be secure. And it's not impossible to be secure and relatively easy to use. And I think, we're on a journey, but I think in my mind, that's one of the big things, which is delivering not just secure technology, but something that's easy to use. And I'll just make a statement of the obvious, which in this room, there's a bunch of people, some of which of you work for security companies and you wake up in the morning and all you do is you think about selling your security product. And the rest of you wake up in the morning and you try and sell your product. And your product isn't security. You sell a product that is secure. And for you, it's not, the whole of your company can't revolve around building security, right? You've got to build your product, your service, and it needs to be secure. And so companies like ours and the other folk around here need to be able to deliver you solutions, your engineer solutions, that let you get on with your life, make your product secure and get on with your life, get on making money, and not have to sweat bullets that the solution isn't going to be secure. So work for us to do there.
Yeah, I think I also would like to introduce another facet, not just the technology aspect, when you think about this problem of the IoT device and in a public service, right? Because we often overlook or underestimate what is the risk of that IoT device to my process. It could be that I'm just monitoring this pressure on this fire hydrant. But if I am monitoring, it's because I'm expecting to have some benefit from it, be able to say, redirect in case of an emergency, fire truck to that fire hydrant or something. What if it is not? So that element of understanding what is the risk if you don't have it. If you put it for a purpose, but it's just not meaningful, then yeah, you might not need it to protect it. But if it is meaningful, it needs to be protected somehow, because you depend on that information eventually. And I think that's the gap. People are not realizing when do they need that information.
Thank you. Just let me make a comment, Mark, before that. But then I just wanted to comment because one of my little pet things, and I think I said it to here or in the previous one, was about this issue of use cases. And smart cities to me is one of the worst, one of the most challenging, because there's a lot of innovative people in the world, and they're trying to solve some kind of a problem. It might be putting pressure sensor on a hydrant for a perfectly good reason, but you can't anticipate what they're going to do. And if you take a smart city, for example, and you put a lot of devices are going to go through cellular systems, they're going to go through Wi-Fi. You don't know how it's going to connect to whatever it's going to. Oftentimes, you don't even have a sense of, you can't anticipate and come up with a structure. Like a lot of standards are built with an assumption of an architecture, of something, at least saying this is the problem. How do I put and here, that's the one I've been worried about with smart cities is there's no boundary. You can't define the boundaries, let alone, so you can't say, well, I'm going to put something here as a perimeter protection because you don't have a perimeter. Where's the perimeter? You don't know. And so I think it's a really challenging thing. I'm hoping that, like Camilla just said, everybody just said it, let's get the devices so that we can get them started. And so when they put it in, you don't have to worry about that because they're not. And the other comment was just yesterday, I was really getting frustrated with our security in our own IT system. I'd say, why do you do that? My wife gets mad at me because I get mad at security. But anyhow, Mark? Oh, okay, please. I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Marty Martin. I'm with Air Liquide. I'm an end user. Having gone through quite a few brownfields or starting that now, a lot of our older, the average IoT of 19 years is about real for us. That's about right on. Understanding the great things that are out there, the useful things that are out there, trying to understand as you're getting bombarded from all of the different companies, are security protocols truly standard? Am I going to put something on that's not quite as secure, doesn't adopt a certain level? Understanding that and then having the right IT, OT people to understand how to build it. That's a challenge for us, okay, to have the right, so when you were mentioning, not, dumbing it down, but making it so you don't have to have a tremendous depth of understanding to utilize good technology, because time goes by so fast. By the time you learn the depth, you lose an opportunity. So addressing that from an end user, because I'm sure I'm not the only one out there that's struggling to try to keep up with what's going on and having the right people and understanding whether these devices are truly compatible from a security standpoint.
Anyone want to take a stab at that? I mean, it was kind of a broad question, so.
The big challenge in security, when you compare this, for example, with reliability, which is usually that what the OT person look at first. When you had an old implementation from the 50s, some electric motor, some gas motor, and you make today the same maintenance that the guy recommended in 1950, your motor still works in the same quality, and nothing changed. In security, everything changed in the last 20 years. So you had standards 20 years ago, algorithms, they're now obsolete, they're dangerous to use. So this old IT, OT thinking, never change a running system, is totally wrong in security. And that is the additional challenge. It is not you implement something one time nice and you're done, you permanently have to follow up. And this brings more trouble because you have to update your systems remotely. You have to sometimes replace components who cannot be updated. And it's a permanent process. And this whole nightmare makes only sense when you really have a feeling this whole IoT brings big advantages for us. And it will bring advantages, but you have to address them first. You say, what is my biggest goal I get out of this? And when I'm so excited about this, then I will also address my security and can tell everyone, look, here is our big progress in advance, and here's our investment in security, and we have to this aligned permanently.
Yeah, I would just add, and again, I'm far from an expert, but I totally agree. I mean, I think your point is it's return on investment, right, for everyone. There's a certain amount of investment you can make and you need to see a return. And whether that's return on investment on the new kit that you're installing or whether it's on the security you're looking at. And I think the way you do that is obviously to try and make the I smaller, the investment. And what I mean by that isn't to have bad security, but to try and at least where we can standardize, make it easier, make it more digestible. There's no such thing as absolute security. And I think somebody joked earlier about, usually at these conferences, the goal is to terrify somebody in the audience, right? And the one that I was in a conference not long ago, and I'll just share it with you, the one that got everyone going from their phones was the fact that with quantum computers, many of the algorithms and crypto that you and I live with, it's going to get toasted. It's just going to get broken. And we're only arguing when. And so there is no absolute end here, unfortunately. There is no absolute security. It's just at that point in time, have we set the bar, appropriately and back to the ROI. At least that's my 2 cents from a non-expert.
Yeah, I'll say that, well, it's also standardizing, right? In a way, because your problem is, do I need more knowledge capability, and how is it going to affect, and how can I get something that doesn't require for me to be a specialized security expert every time? And yes, security is transforming, is a moving target. But how you do that? And I think we need to start somewhere. And we have a good place to start. We have worked several years in defining several standards and practices coming from the ICC and NIST and frameworks. Do we need more? Maybe not. It's going to be crazy to keep adding, as somebody said this morning. But let's put those to work. And by that, we can define a common set of rules that the majority of us are going to abide and play with. They're going to create that baseline that's going to help in term to, I guess, the level of or the amount of capability that you require to support that system security-wise.
I think from a brownfield perspective, when we look at brownfield in the assessment world, it's how do you isolate those pieces? And unfortunately, I don't think that changes even with new equipment, because to your point, that standard's gone in 2 years and your device is outside for another 17. So I mean, a lot of what we've been recommending for customers is actually to abstract a lot of your security layer in the hardware portion, and you focus on renewing that portion on a more regular basis and not necessarily the end devices. Tofinos are a phenomenal example of that, of putting a firewall in between, your access points and going out. And we're seeing a lot of smaller and smaller, simpler and simpler, but more, airtight firewall solutions that are meant to be IoT devices, right? So if you can't do the full suite of it and you don't have the full security staff to manage the suite of it, having a smaller device as your gateway, as your entry point, and you understand that that's the replaceable part, that's how we recommend a lot of folks go after brownfield. And I think a hilarious example for that was one on our autonomy trucks. We had just redesigned the gateway for it. It was phenomenally secure. Everybody said so. Everybody gave it thumbs up when we ran our first scan on it. And there's 2 wide open FTP ports. And we said, what the hell is that? They said, oh, well, we have got an FTP server on board and we can't get our files without it, so we had to punch a hole through the firewall. So it was the same process. It was redesign it, make it go through that process, and understand that edge process is where your IS turnover is.
Okay, real quick, I have an announcement. In terms of registration desk, they have a larger font for your badges. Some of you've got smaller names or tags or whatever, but they now have at the front desk new larger badges for you, so that people that are nearsighted can now see your name. And, so we got that taken care of. The other thing is that, Sid, we have the 2 lunches that we need to announce, and I think we've run out of time. So, okay?
Oh, we have. Okay, I was looking at my second hand. I thought we had 10 minutes left.
No.
Oh. Yes, as Mark said, we have a lunch. Now, the logistics here for lunches, I'm presuming there are box lunches out there. There usually are. Okay, so you can go out and get a box lunch. And then what we've done is to give you some entertainment during your lunch. It'll be in the other room, track 1, I believe. We're going to have 2 companies make presentations. One is a company, Airdetto, which if you don't know, it'd be interesting to learn out who Airdetto is. And then the second presentation will be by AT&T Business, who I think would be find very interesting as to what they have to say about industrial cybersecurity. We all have, I used to have AT&T, but I don't want to say that. I shouldn't have said that. All right, but anyhow, thank you very much. And join me in thanking the panelists. Thank you.